Good morning, you guys. It's your boy Bill Mahari here, representing Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. Much love to the entire LDBC and the entire basketball community. If you want more basketball content, tune in to Basketball Conversations every Friday night, 9 p.m. Central Time. This is where we discuss basketball-related topics, news, debates, and everything else in the world of basketball. The playoffs are underway, though, guys, so be prepared for some long debates and some predictions as we move along in the quest of a new NBA champion. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit the subscribe button, hit the bell icon to get all the latest notifications when I start dropping videos and live streams. Okay, so this is another episode of Morning Historical Perspective. So I'm going to review one of my favorite players, watching during the 90s. And as you see from the London Magic logo on the right hand corner of your screen there, we're going to be talking about Mr. Penny Hardaway. Probably one of the most multi talented guards you ever see in basketball. But unfortunately, his career was kind of cut short due to injuries, and it pretty much put the big delay of his greatness. Because if he would not been injured, he would have been one of the greatest point guards in the game. But I wanted to start talking about his early life. Um, born born basically in Memphis, Tennessee, right? You know, they basically he grew up mostly in Memphis, and when he was a bit young, his grandmother when he visited that family called him pretty, and in more of a southern accent sounded like calling him Penny, and that's where the name Penny Hardaway, the name came in. His real name is actually Anthony, but he adopted the name Penny from his grandmother, and he started playing sports as a youngster by playing football. But his grandmother didn't want him to play the physical sport of football, so he ended up, turning into basketball, and pretty much grew up playing sports at the Memphis YMCA, and he started, developing his skills and playing basketball at that level. When he went into high school at Treadwell High School in Memphis, he averaged 36.6 points per game, 10.1 rebounds, 6.2 assists, and 3.9 steals as a senior. All right. And he basically declared himself going into Memphis State University, which is now named into the University of Memphis. Um, he was forced to sit out his freshman year due to his grades. He was basically academically ineligible. But while he was sitting out his freshman year, um, I just learned about this too. He was actually robbed at gunpoint outside of his cousin's house, and there was some bullets that started flying all over the place, and his foot was hit by a straight bullet. Um, Thankfully, it didn't hurt him as worse, but there was a good significant chance that his career could have ended on the spot, all because of some dumb stuff. But thankfully, it didn't happen, and it gave him the wake up call he needed to do better and try to accomplish more in his life. So he changed his grades around, and he made the dean's list with a 3.4 GPA as an education major. And during that summer of 1992, he was also selected to the 1992 USA developmental team that pretty much scrimmaged against the famous Dream Team. And his teammates were pretty much Chris Webber, Bobby Hurley, Jamal Mashburn, Rodney Rogers, Eric Montrez, Grant Hill, and Allen Houston. That sounds like a really loaded team just by reading at it. And they beat the Dream Team on their first practice until the Dream Team woke up the next day and pretty much embarrassed them. So in his junior year, he pretty much bettered his numbers from his sophomore year. He came back and averaged 22 and a half points per game, 8.5 rebounds, 6.4 assists, 2.4 steals per game, and accumulated two triple doubles during that same year. Became consensus first team All American in '93, and he was a finalist for the Naismith College Player of the Year and the John Wooden Award. hmm Certainly a guy that was pretty much a great all around player coming into college. You know what I'm saying? So after his junior year, he declared for the NBA draft. Now, this is where really you sometimes things just gets behold, right? So the 1993 NBA draft was a weird thing. And I go back towards the 93 draft lottery, right? It was the year when the Magic had finished with 41 regular season victories, right? And they just fell short of the playoffs due to a tiebreaker with the Indiana Pacers. And they were in the draft lottery with one ping pong ball out of 66. And some way, the Magic were able to win the entire draft lottery over teams like Denver, Minnesota, and Philadelphia that had better odds of finishing with the top pick. And the Magic somehow, some way, got the top pick. I'm still convinced that the NBA tried to have Orlando as one of their top main franchises in the league at that time. You cannot convince me otherwise. But the original intent heading into that draft was is that the 93 draft had great talent. They had Chris Webber, it had Jamal Mashburn, Allen Houston, and and also the other guys, and also Penny. So heading into that draft, right? The the plan was for the Magic was to draft Chris Webber and have him paired up with Shaquille O'Neal to form a dominant front line. But in the workouts in between and leading up to the draft, um, they were brought in Penny Hardaway to pretty much bring in for two different workouts and trying to prove to them that he was their top pick. And 2 days before that draft, he played a pickup game with several other Magic players, and he impressed the organization enough to make them their top pick. So, heading into that 93 draft, the Magic drafted Chris Webber, and the Golden State Warriors actually drafted with their third pick Penny Hardaway. Then they swapped the two picks, and Chris Webber ended up going to the Warriors, and Penny ended up going to the Magic. With that being said, it formed one of the best the up and coming one or two punch combinations in the NBA with Penny Hardaway and Shaquille O'Neal. That was before Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant, right? So in his rookie year, the plan was to convert him into a point guard. So he ended up playing two guard for the first half of the season, right? And he pretty much was learning the position with veteran Scott Skiles, who's a really, really talented point guard. And by mid-season, he pretty much took over, the point guard position from Skiles and immediately made his impact in the NBA. In his rookie year, in leading the Magic to their first 50-win season, he averaged 16 points per game, 6.6 assists per game, 5.4 rebounds per game, while finishing with 190 steals at sixth in the NBA. And for that efforts, he was named first team all rookie team and was the runner up to the Rookie of the Year award behind Chris Webber. By the time 94-95 season began, his numbers increased dramatically. He averaged 20.9 points per game, 7.2 assists per game, 4.4 rebounds per game, and 1.7 steals per game in making his first All-Star team, but also leading the Magic to 57 regular season victories and helped lead the Magic along with Shaquille O'Neal to their first ever trip to the NBA Finals, where they ended up getting swept by the Houston Rockets. But when you saw Penny Hardaway in his first 2 years in the league, and this was before Michael Jordan came back to basketball, there was a lot of talk around the league at the time that Penny Hardaway was going to be the next person to take over the league because he was a guy that could distribute the ball. He was very athletic for a 6'7" guard, right? He could basically defend and strip you of the basketball. Powerful finisher and improved jump shooter. This guy was perhaps the most completed guard that you could ever find in the NBA at that time. And he was pretty much a young player at that time. That was even the most scary part. He hadn't even reached his peak yet during that period in the first 2 years. Then 95, 96, he took his game to another level because early in the 95-96 season, Shaq basically broke his thumb and was forced to miss at least 21 games. That meant Penny Hardaway could take more of the offensive load, and boy did he took advantage of that. He helped lead the Magic to a 17-5 start, and in the first month of November, he was averaging 27 points per game, 6.5 assists per game, and 5.8 rebounds and 2.2 assists. This guy was balling at a completely different level that people have yet seen in years. And because of that, there was a lot of talk between about whose team it was after Shaq came back. Now remember, Shaquille O'Neal was due to be a free agent after 95-96, and they were swept out of the playoffs the first year in 94, swept in the finals in 95, right? And now this team was on the cusp of being great. You had two young studs on your team. So all you had to do was try to keep them happy. But Penny Hardaway was becoming much more of his own individual player at that time. And unfortunately, it wasn't. There was no friction between the two men at all. It was more on the lines of, marketing, and just more along the lines of, media stuff that kind of created the vibe between the two young studs, right? So, despite the fact that they led them to basically, 60 regular season victory, it was pretty much overlaps by the Chicago Bulls 72-10 record, which is the greatest of all time. And then he pretty much finished the year with 21.7 points per game, 7.1 assists per game, and 4.3 rebounds per game, and finished third in the MVP voting behind Michael Jordan and Shaquille O'Neal. So the team eventually made it to the Eastern Conference Finals, but unfortunately they got swept by the Chicago Bulls. And unfortunately, the Magic didn't do enough to keep Shaq in Orlando. They pretty much undervalued Shaq to the point where he pretty much felt like he wasn't wanted in Orlando, and pretty much in the middle of the night, Jerry West stole Shaquille O'Neal from the Magic for at least $126 million. That's what happened. So after Shaq left, he became the lone star of the team. And this is where, unfortunately, his injuries started coming into play. Now, by 96, 97, he only played 59 games, right? He averaged 20 and a half points per game. But also, the other interesting aspect was is that there was a lot of issues between himself, the team, and with the against the coach Brian Hill at the time. And he led a coup from with the team to basically get rid of Brian Hill as a head coach with 33 games left in the regular season. But eventually, he helped them lead into a 45 regular season campaign, and basically carried the Magic back from an 0-2 deficit against the Miami Heat. In Game 3 of that series, he had 42 points. And then in Game 4, to pretty much send the series back to Miami, he helped them. He basically carried the load by scoring 41 points. He became the first player in NBA history to score 40 points in back-to-back playoff games. You know what I'm saying? Against a Pat Riley led defensive team. Just amazing. And unfortunately, the injury started coming into play. His knees were pretty much giving out on him. And unfortunately, he had a major knee injury early in the 97-98 season that required surgery. And unfortunately, that's where his decline came into play. Because after he got his first knee injury, he was only 26 when he had his first knee injury. And when that came, it was pretty much the beginning of the decline for him. His knees, took away most of his athletic explosiveness and his ability to really create in the air and do wonderful things with it. When he was healthy and when he was at his peak, the most athletic two guard that you could find in the NBA outside of Jordan. But when the knee injuries came, it took away all of his explosiveness, and it was very, very sad to see. Um, by the, by by 2 years later, he was pretty much traded to the Phoenix Suns, and actually did had a really good revival year um, during that time when he was in Phoenix. We're pairing up with Jason Kidd. He pretty much had a good rebound year, averaging 16 points per game, despite missing most of the time due to foot injuries. But unfortunately, by next year, he had two microfracture surgeries on his left knee in 2001, and he only played 4 games that entire year. That right there was you knew it was pretty much the end of his prime years. And he spent at least he spent 5 seasons with Phoenix, 3 more seasons with New York, and then 1 season basically reuniting with Shaq until he was forced to retire due to the injuries. And it's very sad because when he was at his peak, when he was at the top of his game, he was the most explosive point guard, shooting guard you could ever find in the NBA. And he was pretty much a guy that was destined for the Hall of Fame. The Hall of Fame was tailor made for him. It was right there. His name in the Hall of Fame was etched in stone. But the knee injuries came and it took away what it could have been a great career. And you just sit there and wonder, what if? What if Penny Hardaway didn't injure his knees? What if Shaquille O'Neal decided to stay in Orlando? We don't know. Unfortunately, Shaq left. He paired up with Kobe Bryant and won 3 championships out of it. And if you remember from the Orlando Magic documentary, Penny, you know, was kind of was spiteful about it because he knew that it should have been him and Shaq winning those championships, not him and Kobe. But unfortunately, things happen for a reason. You know, Kobe Bryant, ended up teaming up with Shaq and won those 3 championships and became the greatest 1-2 combo in the history of the NBA. RIP to Kobe Bryant. And you know, you sit there and people talk about, well, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I would agree, but the thing is, we just did not see more enough, healthy years from Penny to really warrant that. Because remember, after 95, 96, he missed a lot of games. He only played uh, 59 games in 97, 19 games in 98. And even though he only played 50 games during the shortened season, right? In 2001, he only played 4 games because he had two microscopic surgeries on his left knee. It was it for the guy. He was just never the same explosive player that he once was, and he was just a thing of beauty. You know what I mean? He was just a gifted guard that came to the league at the right time when basically shooting guards were at the top of the premium in the Eastern Conference. And unfortunately, we never got to see more great rivalries between him and Michael. Him and maybe Grant Hill, even Grant Hill with the ankle injuries after 2000. I mean, even though he's in the Hall of Fame, you think, what if Grant Hill never got those injuries? I mean, we could have seen one of the greatest forwards in the history of basketball. Grant Hill was doing what LeBron James is doing right now, and it's unfortunate to see that both Grant Hill and Penny Hardaway, who basically played against one another during the '90s, you know, their careers got shortened. Their prime years were taken away from them, due to unfortunate injuries. But that's just how sports goes. And so, I just want to give my respect and tribute to one of the greatest, talented guards that's ever played in basketball. And certainly, if he wasn't hurt, he would have been at least top 10, top 5 greatest guards of all time. That's just my opinion on the matter. But tell me what you guys think in the comment section.